key in getting out of what looks like ordinary, what looks like the average that exists. Because with Allergic to Average, we are at war with average. This idea of what average is, it's more than just a word. Okay, it's more than just this concept. It's an actual reality that people really start to come back to and they settle into, and it's so obvious, right? That's really why more and more I want to bring you these topics so that you grow this awareness, your attention, your focus on how to get out of the default into design, right? How to get out of what just seems like the norm, ordinary, every day, and getting more and more into something that's extraordinary, exactly who you're meant to be and how you're continuing to build is really what I want to bring us back to, okay? So I wanted to just give you this idea and really have you think about as we open up and noticing how so many people, maybe you've been there before, you start to really convince yourself that life maybe for you is not special, it's nothing beautiful, or maybe you're just, again, an average person, nothing special or crazy or great about you. And people, including yourself, we don't actually lack talent. It's not that we lack opportunity. It's not that we lack intelligence. It's not that we lack beauty within ourselves. It's not that we even lack greatness, okay? And I'm talking to you because I'm sure there's been certain points in your life where that thought has entered your mind and maybe even become part of your belief system, okay? The biggest transitioning point that gets us out of those thoughts and really giving us more evidence and proof that that's not true is really becoming aware of the power that, okay, putting awareness and drawing attention, building new beliefs around who it is you really are and what you actually carry and what you actually have within you. Okay, so our awareness has to shift. It's not even an issue with the greatness that you carry, the brilliance and the trueness of really who you are as a person. It really becomes we lack an awareness of what is actually true and what we actually have that we can carry. And so here's the reality. Most people, including yourself, we don't wake up and choose just this average life. That's never really at all how it goes, okay? Somebody that gets to this place where they just stop trying, they kind of give up, they throw in the towel, they convince themselves that there's nothing good in them or maybe good in life, right? It doesn't just get to that point just one morning, okay? What happens is over time, okay, and I want you to kind of think about maybe seasons or moments in your life, or maybe you're there right now where you kind of wake up and life just begins to seem ordinary. It just begins to play out, I should say, into another day of nothing special, nothing crazy, right? And so what happens is we start to create a cycle. We repeat yesterday, okay? And it's like taking the same thoughts, taking the same type of reactions. A lot of times we pull in yesterday's problems or last week's problems, we make them today. We start to use the same excuses. And then often we start to fall for and utilize the same distractions that got us out of yesterday and away from those problems, those thoughts, those reactions. We start to tend and go back to those same types of distractions. And so where did this start from? Where did this come from? If we could really start to go back and pinpoint, well, typically average is usually inherited. That's something that maybe we saw or we witnessed that other people do, and it just became the norm. And so often what plays out as just the norm is just something that was repeated over and over and over again. And maybe, again, I go back a lot to our upbringing and to what we were demonstrated, what we were shown. Again, workplaces, schools, our own personal home of what our parents or maybe our grandparents, what did they do? And so we have to really come back to this idea that you're not lacking anything, but really the biggest thing, if it was coming into the awareness of your greatness and what is really true, it's the fact that we don't put awareness and attention and our focus on the truth of that. we dismiss that and we allow other things to convince us that, oh, maybe those are just happy thoughts. Those are just cute, fluffy thoughts about what I could be, but I would be crazy to believe that that is actually true for me. I would be crazy to actually focus and draw my awareness into something that speaks to a higher version of me, a better version, a greater version of me. Sometimes we really think that that is crazy to get into that way of thinking, to put awareness into that way of thinking. And so I wanted to really just give us this idea, bring us back to like what elementary school level should look like when we talk about this word awareness. And what is that? And sometimes just kind of getting back to the basics, getting back to the fundamentals is what we have to do. And so I kind of wrote out really what I wanted you to hear and take away with this idea of what is awareness? What does that look like? And so I wrote some notes out and I want to just kind of take you through those real quickly. So awareness in psychology or philosophy, right? And this idea of what is this awareness? Awareness is a perception or knowledge of something. So that's what awareness is. It's the perception, okay, or the knowledge of something, okay? The concept is often thought as consciousness. You being unconscious, right? That's things you're unaware of and things that you're conscious of, consciousness, having consciousness drawn into that. That's really what we link so much of awareness to. However, you can be aware of something without fully being conscious of it. So you're aware of something, you have a perception or you have knowledge about it, but you're not fully conscious of it. You're not fully aware. You just have the concept or the ideas of this awareness, all right? Your states of awareness are also associated with your states of experience. Now, this is really where this gets concrete for us, all right? Your states of awareness are associated with your states of experience, which means, okay, when you grow awareness in something, it's often linked and it's mirrored by the structure of the experience you have with that. So the reason why this is important is because a lot of times we don't really put more effort into this awareness that we actually are good, loved people, that there is a higher divine truth or intelligence that has created us for more, created us for abundance, created us for love, created us to prosper, because we don't have the evidence of that, right? Awareness is always linked to so much more of how much of this experience do we have around that thing. And so what we're more aware of is all the times in our life where we haven't felt like enough. All the times in our life where there hasn't been enough, right? Maybe that's resources or maybe it's relationships. We have more of the experience of what it's felt like to be afraid, to not be confident. And so when it comes to bringing our awareness out of that default way of being, okay, where we all started from, the average version of us, shifting into a designed, right, growing awareness into something higher, something bigger, better, stronger, even more sustainable that actually speaks to the truth of who we are, there's no evidence for that. And so it seems like this magical, mystical, crazy thing for us to start to put awareness on really the truth of who we are, right? And so coming from default, okay, that average way, that average version of who we start out as, and going into a designed way, an allergic to average way of being and doing things. Normally no one shows us how to do that. No one taught us. It's definitely not a subject in school. It's definitely not something that most parents, I would say, most of your caregivers were actually taught or demonstrated. So it's just something that we have to start to discover and figure out and really just find, okay, the truth behind that. And so that's why more and more Tune In Tuesdays, talks like this, Allergic to Average, the mindset movement, we are just completely obsessed, but also dedicated to this idea of what does it look like getting out of default and continuing to grow in the design of who you really are. So awareness is the topic right now, right? And you getting to see that awareness is so much of what actually allows you to shift and continuing to shift, stay on that path of shifting into the greater. And so this takes me back to, again, our upbringing, okay? Again, we weren't really demonstrated this. Most people, our parents, our grandparents, their parents really didn't have this topic, this idea, and this truth available to really anchor in. And so your awareness of your thinking, okay? Thinking about do you ever think about what you think about? Right? Do you ever put any kind of emphasis in where your thoughts are, right? And I'm going to break that down and why that's important. If you've heard some of these Tune In Tuesdays before, you've heard some of those ideas, okay? Awareness of habit, okay? The habits that you're developing, from the smallest things to, your reactions, to the way you respond to things without even thinking, right? Where's your awareness with that? Most of us weren't demonstrated being aware of your habits, right? Your awareness of even what you tolerate. Often, it's been told to me, and I let that stick out so much, what you tolerate will dominate. And there's a lot of things that we begin to tolerate in our life, and it just seems small, it seems unimportant, but then all of a sudden we'll find our place in a season or a moment where we're being dominated by things that are overwhelming, that are stressful, that are fearful into our life, and we're finding ourselves in a really uncomfortable, unfulfilled place, all right? So again, this idea that I want to bring you back to is average doesn't happen by accident. Average happens when we stay in the default. We stay in a default way of being, a default way of thinking, and we don't really put any awareness into the design of growing our thoughts, growing our beliefs, right? And so the wisdom of scriptures brings us to this idea. So much of what A to A has been founded on is this idea of, not to conform. Okay, don't conform. So that means don't be an individual that just stays in the default, the patterns of what's going on, the culture around you, what everything else looks like, everything else is. Then you just kind of fall into line with that, right? That's conforming. Don't be conformed, but be transformed. Right? How can we be transformed? Where does that happen? That comes back to the renewing of your mind. And really, the only way, I would say the first way to start in renewing your mind is by growing in awareness of where is your mind, what are your thoughts, what are your beliefs, okay? Because your thoughts they're not just thoughts, okay? And that's been a something that I think for most people growing up, there was no awareness around that. We know what a negative thought is. Sometimes we know what happy thoughts, positive thoughts are, but to actually grow in awareness of realizing that you must challenge your thoughts. We have to really upgrade or sometimes dismiss thoughts that come in our mind. And we have to become the commanders, the creators of the thoughts that we're generating. And so those thoughts, if we don't challenge them, and we leave them as just default thoughts, those start to become our beliefs, right? And so those beliefs will kind of echo and go back into really so much of what is the patterns and recognitions that we're seeing. And so I want to just kind of give you an example of what that looks like, all right? And so in this idea, okay, your thoughts and your beliefs, now these kind of partner together because starting at a young age, your biggest core beliefs became really a part of who you are. Now, these were just naturally what you saw, how you took in the experience of the world, how it works, how it operates, what to do, what not to do, what's good to do, what's bad to do, right? So at an early age, up until the time that you were probably 5 to 7 years old, 95% of your beliefs were already anchored in, okay? This is what you responded is, this is how life is. This is how life works. So by the time you were 7, those beliefs were already there. Now, those beliefs continuously pull into the thoughts that you generate. Again, what you believe, you perceive as truth. That's how it is. That's what it is. Now, that's around money. That's around God. That's around friends. That's around the world. That's around all of it. You name it. But as we get older, and it's our responsibility to shift out of, again, this default way of thinking and really getting into this designed way of thinking, these things work together, okay? Because your thoughts primarily stem from these beliefs that we've carried. But eventually, what starts to happen is those thoughts, as we grow in awareness and we realize that, man, I don't think that's actually true. I want to challenge that, or that doesn't actually serve who I am or who I want to be, right? And so as we start to upgrade and change our thoughts, getting out of that default, the negative, the fear-based way of thinking, okay, that starts to actually incorporate and bring us back into new beliefs, right? So these thoughts, maybe that we carried from old beliefs, as we upgrade those thoughts and we start to transition into new beliefs, what could actually be true, the fact that you're not average, you're not just ordinary, that you are somebody that carries a greatness and brilliance within the life that you live, right? Then those new beliefs come back and they generate and they start to articulate new thoughts, right? And so out of those new thoughts, okay, and this could even go truth in alignment with your old beliefs, right, which generate from your old thoughts. But regardless of where this stands, this is really the two biggest points that we have to focus on, because out of this, right, these thoughts from these beliefs that generate these thoughts, they generate an actual chemical feeling within your body. You start to attach into, which makes it real life experience on the feelings that you're generating, you're carrying through your moment by moment, day by day, every single day, right? Life that you're sorry, I'm overwhelming myself there, that you're actually responding from. It's these feelings. Now, those feelings, okay, those start to generate us into the actions, how we're showing up, what we're doing, what we're not doing. And when we see most people, which look like lazy people, people that are just kind of taking the easy route, settling in, this is all coming from here, right? Bringing us into the actions, and those actions, okay, bring us into our results, which another way of recognizing results, it starts to create a pattern within your life, okay? And so that pattern actually gives us the actual demonstration and really the response of what is going on, what is happening. So again, I wanted to really summarize and bring it back to, look, your life is following your thinking, right? This primary position between beliefs, between your thoughts, this is where it's all coming back to. And the reason why we're talking about awareness, right? Your focus, this allows us to see where your focus goes, right? What you're focusing on, okay? You're becoming. And so a lot of times we can see this play out, and giving you an example. So often, if I am somebody that, I'll give you an example for me, right? If I'm somebody that has a belief that I am not creative, right? And this is actually true. And when I say creative, I just thought of somebody that had the mindset behind generating a creative idea. For a long time, my idea was, as a creative, you're somebody that needs to be artsy. You're somebody that you can draw, you can paint, you can do any of these things, right? I carry that belief that I'm not very creative. I even thought about that as a speaker. I wasn't, for a long time, I thought maybe I'm not that great with words. Definitely as a writer, that doesn't fit me. No, I'm not a creative. So anytime it came time to really think about being creative or allowing my creative nature to be at work, for me to partner with that, to activate that, well, automatically my belief started to generate thoughts that said, well, you can't do that. You don't do that. That's not you, right? And so the feeling would often bring me into feeling discouraged, right? Or like, I better not, or I can't, right? I don't feel like I'm capable, I'm able to, right? And so guess what? I wouldn't. I would talk myself out of it because I believed that I wasn't that. Those thoughts actually supported the feelings. And then I ended up taking no action in what it could be or what it looked like to be a creative. So from that, I created a pattern for a long time. Those were my results. Even from as simple as drawing, like sketching, right? Now, I would say sometime after middle school, out of going into high school, I started to really challenge those thoughts, right? Because I really felt like to be a creative doesn't mean you just draw, you just can articulate with a pen, pencil, paints. There's other ways that we are creative. And so I started to find, what does that look like for me? And so that became something to where instead of focusing on being a creative, by the way I draw, I paint, I sketch, any of these things, I started to actually notice how I'm creative and a lot of times the other ways that I'm creative in my life. And so that became by a lot of the practices and experiences of designing something or building something. This for me at a young age too became even like taking just wood and starting to bring it into something, a piece of furniture, a table, which later became a hobby, right? I'd take pallets that people would throw away or at a workplace that I used to work for, and I would take those home, cut them down, and turn them into furniture. Okay. And then that just became later, as I started to realize and build a new belief around that, that became more and more ways of how I found my creative nature and how I actually am creative. I just had to actually grow my awareness and see what did that really look like? What is that? And so that's the same for you and I, okay? In that, so much of what we see and really what we're getting is the evidence that we're either allowing ourselves to put awareness on this belief and this idea that it's not true, all right? Or putting some awareness and putting some actual demonstration on what could be, right? And so out of that, your beliefs, to sum that up, those really, through all that process I just showed you, that really becomes the lens. That really becomes the actual way that you see the world, that you see your life, that you see you. And so those beliefs are important. And so many times your awareness on what has actually been the case before it's false. It's not true. It needs to be upgraded, updated to the actual truth of who you are. And so if you come back to this idea of maybe moments and seasons where you've talked yourself out of it, okay? Or maybe at one point you were convinced and you thought that I'm not good at that, but then maybe later in your life you actually found that you were, right? Then you can see the evidence of where you've had a false or default way of thinking and why there's still opportunities for you to continue to upgrade and update those beliefs, right? And so in so much of what we're seeing, this becomes more and more of a healing process within yourself, right? This becomes something that as you see that, hey, there's been insecurities, there's been fears, there's been traumas that have affected this fear-based way that I think about me, that I think about the world, then you have to come back and realize that there's actually forgiveness for yourself. Maybe it's for others, right? There's actually a way in kind of finding healing and wholeness into the mindset that you carry, into the heart that you carry. And sometimes the reason why we hold these negative beliefs and why we go back to those things or we still repeat those as true is because a part of us is still convinced out of pain, out of rejection, out of maybe a really unfortunate time of our life, that was actually the way that the world worked, that is actually who you are, right? A lot of times you've heard the saying, like, even hurt people hurt people. And so maybe at some point in your life, somebody has hurt you. They've rejected you. They've wronged you. They've belittled you. And sometimes we unconsciously take in other people's beliefs about us. And so we have to get back into realizing that, hey, who you are, right, and who you're becoming goes back to so much of what you're allowing yourself to be conscious of and growing your awareness in who is actually going to be demonstrating. And so the awareness, right, is something that it should constantly grow, right? And so, like, even growing your awareness in what are some of the past pain points, what are some of the people in the past that have rejected you, right? And a lot of times those are clues into the future, into your present moment of places that you are actually able to move forward in and not be stuck in, right? And so growing your awareness on even places, I love the saying, your place of pain becomes your place of rain. And it's important for us to notice what are seasons, moments, areas of life that have been pain points for you but now can continue to be something that allows you to actually help others out of places where you were rejected, places where you suffered, you found pain, right? These are now meant as you find healing in your mind, in your heart, you find more and more wholeness. This allows you to help others out of those painful places. And so your lens, again, determines more and more of this life that you're living, that you're experiencing. And so out of that, like, you know, this is the difference between in one point of your life, depending on the lens that you're carrying and the work that you're doing, why we can experience limitation. But in another season, in another area, or in another, you know, you could be in the exact same moment, but with a different mindset. You could see actual possibilities instead of limitations. You could actually see what is something that you could actually carry versus, you know, what you don't have and what you don't carry. And so this brings us back to more and more. The mindset is really, you know, the attitude of the mind is really what changes so much of what we're experiencing, what we're going to allow ourselves to tap into and to continue to grow in. And so in saying that, I wanted to just bring us into, like, you know, with our awareness, and this is why this is such a strong, anchoring, foundational point of what actually brings us out of default into design, is because the world around you, it benefits when you're distracted. Okay. So endless scrolling, scrolling, the comparison, when we start to get back into the drama, which is so easy, right? When we are really just left with this fear-based way of thinking, and we just kind of leave it there, then that brings us back into this distraction, the noise. And companies benefit off of that, right? Other people that we call maybe even haters, they love when you're distracted. They would prefer to be distracted in so much of what you're doing. And so if your attention is scattered, your life will be too. Okay? If your attention is scattered, your life will be too. And so you can't build an extraordinary life. You can't move into continuing to grow in the allergic to average individual you are when your mind is constantly unfocused, when there's not attention brought into what actually matters and what actually means the most for you and what you're doing. And so again, bringing it back to allergic to average, right? This isn't about, allergic to average isn't about being better than others, right? It's refusing to live unconsciously. It's refusing to not let your awareness just be left up to chance, just be left up and distracted by everything and everything else going on around you. And that's the easier thing to do. This is why most people are more concerned about what's going on in other people's life. They know more stats about athletes and pro athletes and celebrities than they know about themselves, because it's easy to put awareness on somebody else than it is yourself. But that's the most important thing we can do. And so this means deciding to challenge your thinking, right? Being the creator and the commander of your beliefs, your thoughts, right? Raising your standards wherever you were left in default mode from your upbringing, right? Finding ways to upgrade. Take the baton, take the torch, and raise the standard, right? Growing your awareness is how we do it. And this will allow you to design your life instead of drifting through life. The average just kind of drifts through life, allowing what comes, circumstances to dominate them, distractions, problems, fear, so on and so forth. And so I wanted to end this on just really, what are some things that can increase your awareness? How do we build this, right? And so as we build that awareness, right, that eradicates more and more in your life the average that exists. And so if you start living differently, then you're going to start asking yourself these three questions. Or maybe this is already a path that you've been on. So these are just three questions to keep in mind for you to just kind of stay in that mindset, right? So one would be, what do you think about the most? What is that primarily dominated in? Is that in love, loving things, loving for others, loving for primarily really yourself, right? What do you think about the most? That would be the first thing to really process and think about. The second one would be, is this mindset helping me grow or is it keeping me small? Okay. So these thoughts that you primarily think about, what do you think about the most in that? Is that a mindset? Are those thoughts, those beliefs helping you to grow? Are they keeping you small, playing small, showing up small, seeing you being just a small person in this world? Okay, that would be the second one. The third one would be, what would someone living an above average life, right, think in this situation? How would they respond? And a way to even hone that in even more is like, if I was to be allergic to average right now, how would I see this? If I was to actually acknowledge some greatness, or I just was to tap into a little bit more confidence, how would I actually see this? Okay. And that really helps us to grow our awareness into what feels like small, but brings us into big changes over time. Again, moment by moment, day by day, as you start to grow your awareness and your thoughts, are they serving you? Right? Are they keeping you small? And if you were allergic to average in that moment, in that situation, what would you do? What would you do differently? How would you show up? And maybe in the beginning, as you think about, oh, I would do it differently, or I would do this, maybe on that specific moment in that time, maybe you don't do it, but at least your awareness goes into, man, if I was to do it differently, right? Sometimes this is just that self-reflection. A lot of times I can think about, as I end, I'll think about nights and moments where I come back and I think about a day or in that day, something that played out, something that happened I didn't really like. I didn't really like the way that conversation went, the way I approached something. Your mental rehearsal, the way, if you could, okay, if I was being more allergic to average in that situation, how would I have done that differently? That awareness alone is powerful enough to start to shift the way that you show up. That is already putting a design in the way that you're processing, you're doing. And so when you revisit that, when you have some more mental just feedback, responding, awareness, rehearsal, you think back and how would you do it differently? That already helps you to show up differently. So process that, okay? I want you to take that with you and just see where it fits. See how you can start to incorporate your awareness, where you're putting that and how you can grow it. And so I want to bring it to an end. I believe I've taken enough of your time today, and I appreciate you tuning in on another Tune In Tuesday. Send your feedback, send your love. And again, it's your boy, Matt Lee. I'll see you on the next one. Love you guys. I'm out.